Today on Soul Work for Moms.
Kerrie Woodhouse lives in Australia and is the mother to twins, and she used to do a whole lot of what she calls very serious things. But a few years ago, she says she came to her senses and remembered that life is supposed to be fun. For Kerrie, creative expression is fun, so she creates something with paint and words every day, and then she posts it on Instagram. Kerrie has just published her first book, Finding Grace. It's an illustrated book for adults that explores the meaning of grace and its power to help us find acceptance of what we do not have in our lives in order to begin to find the joy in what we do have. Finding Grace is dedicated to Kerrie's dear friend who was bravely battling breast cancer at around the time that she started drawing the little whimsical girls that now appear in the book. Kerrie says that while drawing these girls and spending time with her friend during treatment for breast cancer, she spent a lot of time contemplating grace. As such, in her book, she's included quotations about grace that she found meaningful, along with her own thoughts on this most admirable quality. You're listening to the Soul Work for Moms podcast. I'm Michelle Duncan-Wilson. Mothering is all things joyous, painful, beautiful, amazing, terrifying, and the list goes on and on. One thing's for certain, though, it's seldom what you thought it would be. Soul Work for Moms shares the stories of motherhood and the personal and spiritual growth that comes along with it. Welcome to the show. So, Kerrie, first of all, welcome to the show. Thank you for being with us here today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Michelle. It's wonderful to get the opportunity to talk with you.
First of all, you are a really talented artist. And when I first went to your website, I was just blown away at the depth and the quality of your work. So how long have you been an artist? I don't, it feels weird to say it like that because I think everyone is an artist in some way, but how long have you been painting and drawing?
Well, first of all, that's very kind of you. Thank you. I appreciate your kind words. And it's funny. It is. I still find it quite hard to think of myself as an artist because it's not something that I had ever really thought about as a child, and not something I did at school at all. I was kind of the maths and science and language kid, and arts weren't really all that encouraged when I was at school. But somewhere along the line, I kind of got bitten by the creative bug and just thought, no, this is something I really want to try. So it's only been about 2 or 3 years that I've been quite seriously trying to get better at drawing and learn different techniques.
Oh my gosh, that is so shocking to me. I was expecting you to say like, oh, I've been drawing since I was 5 and I won, this art contest at school, and wow, really just a couple years. That's amazing.
Well, thank you. It's funny because those are the kind of things that kind of give you that little bit of imposter syndrome that you're thinking, oh, can I really be doing this? I wasn't the kid that did art at school. Do I have any right to be doing this?
Yeah.
But, I can't stop myself. So here I am.
Yeah. And imposter syndrome, I think we'll have to talk about that a little bit more. But before we get to that, you were saying to me that before you were an artist, you used to do a lot of very serious things, right? That's how you phrase it. So what were those very serious things that you were doing?
Well, I'm a chartered accountant. So I started out being an auditor, and I've had my own accounting practice for a while, and I worked in big corporates. And then I decided I would like to do some more studying. So I went back to university, and I became a university lecturer in the business faculty and started doing my PhD. So those all seem to be very serious things that I no longer do.
And so you're a mom, that's why you're on the show. How did motherhood fit into all of that? When you were getting your PhD, did you already have your littles, or when did that all fit in?
Well, I had them right in the middle of my PhD, which really wasn't the best timing. But one of the reasons I went to work in a university was because it was a little bit more of a family-friendly environment. You have a little bit more flexibility in the working hours. There isn't less work to do. There's just more flexibility in the face-to-face hours. So that seemed like a really good idea. And it was helpful in the beginning, but then it also became quite difficult, especially doing something with flexible time can actually be less freeing rather than more freeing, because you're constantly torn between the different aspects of your life, and the boundaries are more blurred because you don't have fixed working hours. So eventually I decided I would take a career break. And I really did that because the one day I was sitting on a holiday with my kids at the beach, and they were very little at the time. They were sort of 2 or 3, and I was watching my daughter playing with her colouring pencils, and she was drawing, and she just looked so happy, and she was so totally engrossed in what she was doing. And I thought, gee, I want to do that. Why don't grown-ups do this kind of thing? And I think that, that was the start of it.
And when you did take that career break, how seamless was that? I know that when I stopped working, I had kind of an identity crisis for quite some time after that, because it was really hard to get used to not identifying myself as someone that worked, or this is my job, or this is who I am. How was that for you?
Absolutely, as you describe it. It was, I thought I was making things better, and then for a while I thought, no, I've actually made things worse, because it was also the university I worked for is a big university here, and I also realised that some of the worth that you kind of give yourself is attached not only to your job but also to the associate institution that you have an affiliation with. So that seemed even worse. And then I looked back at all the exams and all the hours and all the qualifications I'd collected and thought, what am I doing? And am I throwing this all away for nothing?
Oh my gosh, I think so many people will be able to relate to that. And what got you through that, or where are you now with that, or what helped?
Well, I heard somebody describe it like this, that you lean your ladder up against a wall and you climb all the way to the top, and then you realize you leaned it against the wrong wall. And for a while I thought that's what I had done. But now I prefer to think of it as I don't regret any of those things I've done in the past, because there's always value to whatever you've done and whatever you've learnt, and you kind of underestimate the skills that you've collected that are valuable in other areas that you don't really expect. Like I did a PhD, and it was in financial accounting, so that's really quite a niche area. And then I was thinking, well, that really is only useful in a university. But that wasn't true, because that, for example, is a really big project. So what I learned was how to be persistent at a really big project, how to do lots of research, how to write well, how to articulate my arguments, how to defend my arguments. And those are all useful things no matter what you end up doing. So I think there's always value to something that you've done in the past. And just because you've invested a lot of time and effort, and even if you've achieved a lot of success in whatever field you're in, there's no harm, or there's no problem with doing something else. You needn't keep on doing something just because you're doing it. I think it comes down to, is it bringing joy to your life or not? And I think it was really important for me to work out that stopping doing what I had done in the past wasn't diminishing it. It wasn't saying that wasn't a good idea, or it wasn't, it was something that I shouldn't have done. But not at all. I enjoyed doing it while I was doing it. A lot about it was really good. It was fantastic when I had my very small babies, because I could work only a couple of days a week, and that kind of gave me a bit of headspace. But things change, and you move on, and you want something new, and there's no problem with that. That's growth.
And you came on today to talk about a friendship, actually, that you had with another woman, and how that really had a big impact on the way that you live your life right now.
Yes, that's right, Michelle. It was a bit of a sad story, because this is a friend who I'm a mum of twins, and so was she, and that's how we met. We kind of raised our babies together, and we lived a couple of houses away from each other, and so I spent a lot of time with her. And she was really that friend who never has any judgment and is always supportive of whatever you do. And when I first started drawing, and it seemed like such an odd thing for me to be doing, given the other stuff that I was doing, she was one of the first people who I actually showed my sketchbook to. And she became my drawing buddy, because she thought, she said, I fancy doing this too. So we used to get together quite often with the intention of doing some drawing together, because we were both very good at collecting art supplies and having this intention to actually sit down and draw, but it was hard to make yourself sit down and do it. That's also when you're starting to learn something and you don't feel like you have the skills yet. You kind of it's kind of a fear thing that you're sort of resistant. So we tried to do that together. And we did do a bit of drawing together. We probably did more tea drinking than drawing, but the idea was there. And it was around about that time that I came across a challenge on Instagram, which was called the 100-Day Project, where the idea was that you choose a creative practice that you can do every day for 100 days and you post it on Instagram. And I thought, well, I want to make sure I do something in my sketchbook every day. So I gave myself this exercise of, with very limited supplies, drawing these little whimsical girls. And that's what I was doing when my friend Isabel was diagnosed with breast cancer. And when we were together and talking, one of the things that kept coming up was this idea of grace, because as part of her treatment, the sort of support and counselling side of it, she was being given meditations and CDs and books to read, and they kept mentioning grace. And she kept saying, what do you make of grace? What is it? And it was a question that really fascinated me, because it is a word that we kind of toss about. But if you ask someone to articulate it or give a clear definition, it's kind of hard to pin it down. So I found that because we were having those conversations and I was sitting drawing these little girls, that was inevitably what my mind kind of turned to. And I think this is the value in doing something creative, no matter what the creative activity is that it kind of puts you in the moment, and it sort of quietens out all that white noise, and it lets your kind of inner wise self come forward and start processing whatever's on your mind. And one day I was drawing these little girls, and this one particular face popped up, and I thought, oh my goodness, she is Grace. She seemed to embody everything that Grace meant to me, and that's the little girl who's on the cover of my book now. And then from there, once I saw her, I thought, let me see what other people were, think about Grace. And I started collecting quotes and reading a bit about it and drawing more of these little girls. And then eventually I kind of pulled that together and put it into a book. Unfortunately, my friend died before she got a chance to see that book. But it does feel like there's so much of her in the book that it's lovely to have a kind of tangible reminder of her.
I'm really sorry to hear about the passing of your friend, but what a beautiful connection that you have to her now with this book that you've created and all of those memories of drawing. And I'd imagine that you could think of her every time that you sit down to draw.
That's right. Yes, thank you for that. It's also, she, it was an awfully sad thing to have to watch. And to accept. But when I look back on it now, I realise that was quite a privilege to be able to see the way she went about that, because she taught me quite a lot about acceptance and about positive thinking. Because what amazed me is whenever she had a setback or, got some bad news or some test results that weren't quite what she'd hoped for, of course she was devastated to start with, but it was amazing how quickly she would bounce back and find some sort of positive approach that helped her move forward. She would find some way to change her diet. She would find some, new set of books to read that was sort of giving her a little bit more hope. And she would be so cheerful about the next treatment she was going to, and she would find another trial to sign up to. And that was amazing to witness, the power of positivity, because I was always, everybody talks about positive thinking. And then when something horrendous like this happens, you think, does that really help? And positive thinking doesn't make your problems go away, and it doesn't stop you having problems. But what I saw is that it really does put you in the space in which you can actually deal with them. It allows you to be able to handle them. And when she did that, because she was so positive, I think she managed to cope with something so difficult in a much easier way than she would have if she'd kind of sort of surrendered to the kind of horror of it all. And because she did that, it made it easier for all the people around her to support her, because that can be quite difficult too. So that was wonderful to see, that her approach changed her experience and the experience of people around her. And now, every time I come across something that's a little bit difficult, I'm always thinking, well, if Isabel could find the grace to go through something as extreme as she did, in the way that she did, surely I can find the grace to figure out what I need in this particular situation, to accept where I am, and figure out what would be the most positive way, the most productive way to move forward.
Which brings us to the book, which is titled Finding Grace, The Path to Acceptance. And it's actually an illustrated book for adults.
That's right.
So tell us about the book. I've seen it. I've seen pictures of it. I've not yet read it. I can't wait to. The release date is October 30th. So just give our listeners a sense of how this book is a little bit different from, just a traditional paper book with words.
Well, it's every second page is an illustration. And what I did is I started by asking the question, what is grace? And then the book kind of takes a bit of a journey to figure out what are the various meanings of grace and how do we apply it, and what sort of situations do we use the word grace, and what does that mean to us? And it's a lot of quotations, because that's I love quotes. And so one of my first points of call was to find out what wise people have said in the past about grace, and that I found really helpful. So a lot of the little girls, when I drew them, maybe it was because I'd found a particular quote, and that's what I had in mind when I was drawing. And somehow some sort of essence of these things ends up in your drawing, even if you're not trying to do that. I think it probably works better if you're not trying to do that. So there's quotations, there's my own reflections, and then there's the illustrations. And then at the back of the book, I also included my story of the 100-Day Project and how I go about drawing the girls.
And is there a link that we can provide to a 100-Day Project where people could find out more about that?
Absolutely, yes. That's Elle Luna. And she runs that every year. But if you just looked for the hashtag 100-Day Project, just with the numbers, 100-Day Project, as a tag in Instagram, you would find a whole lot of people's projects. It's a really fun thing to watch out. It normally runs in sort of about April, May every year. And people do all sorts of things. There was a chap who was playing the piano, and some people are baking, and some people are potters, and it's wonderful to photographers. There's lots of photographers. So it's wonderful to see all these different creative activities. And also, what's amazing is how many of them, at the end of the 100 days, it turns into something bigger than some small project that you were doing. So it's great to see that it doesn't take a lot of effort, but if you're consistent, something bigger tends to come of it.
And you said you have twins. How old are the twins now?
They're 9 now.
Oh my gosh, they're 9. And
I know, it goes so fast.
What was it like for them to see you go through this process of becoming an artist? Do they only have memories of you, in the studio and painting, or what's their experience of mom with her art?
I think it probably confused them a little bit because I remember at the one we had a careers day at school where all the little kids, got to ask their parents to come in and talk about what they did. And that was when I was still working as a lecturer. So I went and told all the kids about, what it's like to be a lecturer in a university and talked to them about universities. And then the next thing they knew, I wasn't doing that anymore. So... But I think at the end of the day, what matters to kids is how happy you are. In fact, I think I saw that on Happify, I'm a Pinterest junkie, and I saw they were saying that a mother's satisfaction with her own life is more important to a child's well-being than any of the other factors like her education or her job or her socioeconomic group or any of that. So I think that possibly is what I've seen for them. As long as I seemed happy, they kind of go about their own business, and they're not too bothered what you're doing as long as you're happy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. And I even think about my own experience. I've been a stay-at-home mom for almost 10 years now. And I would go back and forth all the time with some of that identity stuff that I was talking about earlier. And my poor children, just seeing me go through all of that, and to now having gone through a lot of that soul work to feel really confident and really happy in how it is that I'm living my life. Of course, this podcast really helps me personally with feeling very fulfilled and happy, but it's almost like they can breathe easier when they know that all is good and that mom's not stressed, or, the same goes for dad as well. But just our ability to be there with our children and be able to actually, I feel like, focus on them more when we're with them, when we don't have a laundry list of things weighing on us as well.
Absolutely, yes. I'm so glad to have the time to spend with them. But I think all of us, being a stay-at-home mum is by far the hardest job I've ever done. I've done lots of jobs, but this is the hardest. And I think we all need something outside of the home to kind of fill you back up again. And for some people, that's a job. For other people, maybe it's the tennis club, maybe it's painting, maybe it's gardening. It doesn't really matter what it is, but I think we all need something to give us a bit of perspective, that you can view each part of your life from a different aspect. Maybe if you're involved in some sort of community activities or something like that, just something small outside of being a stay-at-home mum makes being a stay-at-home mum even better.
The show's not over yet, but I wanted to let you know that there's a free giveaway going on right now in our Soul Work for Moms Facebook group. 2 members of the group will be chosen to receive a free diaper genie and refill set on November 30th. All you have to do for a chance to win is be part of the group, because group members are automatically entered into every giveaway that's done on the show. Go to soulworkformoms.com/community and it will link you straight to the group. Again, that's soulworkformoms.com/community. Now let's get back to the show. This, I think, is really beautiful. I noticed on your website that 50% of the proceeds from your book are being donated to the Cancer Council. This sounds like it's really a project from the heart. It wasn't a project of, I'm going to write a book and this is my inspiration, but really that this all came about very naturally. And to donate 50% of the proceeds of anything, I mean, that's quite the commitment. That tells me that this is all out of love.
I think it's a lot of my coping process. I suppose we all grieve in different ways, and it's been really helpful for me. But yes, you're absolutely right. It is a passion project. I suppose at the moment I do really feel like my main job is my kids, and everything else is kind of the joyful side. Inevitably these things become more of a business, but this book certainly kind of took on a life of its own, because I have been wanting to write a book for ages, but that was a novel and I wanted to write another book on creativity, so I had those other books, but the one that has just flowed has been this one. So I think you've just got to kind of follow the joy, and if this is the one that is speaking, then that's the project that needs to be completed.
So I'm really excited to hear about your soul work action step that you have suggested for all of our moms listening. So let's just dive right into that.
Okay, well, since I had taken on that 100-day project with my little 10-minute journal, is what I called it, that so inspired me to be spreading the word, and I'd love for everyone to just try this, even if it's only for a week, to pick something that you could do, only 5 or 10 minutes, and it's to do something creative. But I know using the word creative kind of tends to turn off a lot of people because they're worried that they need oil paint and a beret and that sort of thing. But it can be anything. It could be journaling, it could be sketching, maybe it's gardening or knitting or baking. It could even just be taking your camera when you go for a walk and taking some beautiful photos of the autumn leaves on the ground. It doesn't have to be complicated because it's all about the process. So my suggestion, something that I would like everybody to try, is to think of this thing that they can do. It needs to be a small exercise, hopefully something creative, and by that I mean use your hands to do something, but just for the process. Don't expect yourself to make a beautiful thing, just make a thing, because it's in engaging in that creative process, I think, really puts us in touch with our inner wise self. I think it lets all that, I always talk about it as the white noise, all these little things that the monkey mind is worrying about. It. Once you're doing something creative and actually using your hands in some way, you're immediately present, you're totally in the moment, and those other things don't seem to matter. And I find that even if you're not focusing on whatever your particular problem is, you might find that later on in the day, a good idea about how to solve that problem comes to you, or you just feel a bit calmer about it. And I really believe that's because you've given yourself a little bit of space, and most of our answers we already have inside of us. We're just never present enough or quiet enough or still enough to see it. And in fact, all that present and quiet and still makes me think of meditation. And this is how I view this. It's sort of meditation for people who don't like meditating or find meditating difficult. I think doing something creative gives you the same sort of benefits. In fact, there's an awesome book, if anybody's interested in it. It's called The Creativity Cure by Kerrie Barron, and she's a psychologist, and she talks about, well, I'm paraphrasing here, but creativity is the cheapest therapy ever. So if you want to take up my challenge and do your little 10-minute thing, I think you'll be converted. And if you want to read more about it, I highly recommend that book.
Yeah, I love that idea. I love that practice. I know that for me, when I had just had, I think, my second child, and I fell into knitting. I just fell in love with it. And it wasn't even from the beautiful projects that I was creating, because at first they were not very beautiful. In fact, I went to knit a sweater, like a little shrug for myself. And I was so excited, and I was knitting away happily. I was very new at knitting, and this thing that I made, it was small enough to fit my little 4-year-old niece. So I had a lot to learn about knitting, but I was just so struck by how calming it was, and how much I would look forward to it in the morning when I would wake up, that little,
oh yes,
whether it was nap time or just when the kids were at the park, that I could just pull out this little project. It was like a little friend that was waiting for me that I couldn't wait to go spend time with.
Exactly. And isn't that so much easier than someone saying to you, all right, well, now you need to sit still and focus on your breathing for 10 minutes? No, but if I said, can you sit with your knitting for 10 minutes? Sure, no problem, And I think it's the same benefit.
And then also with the 10 minutes, sometimes depending on what your project is, getting started is half the battle. And so even if you're just able to do it for 10 minutes, which I'm hearing from you is more than enough for the practice that you're talking about. But a lot of times you'll sit down to do something for 10 minutes. I do this with the show even. I'll think, I don't have time to edit, or I can't work on this right now. But if you just get started for 10 minutes, something else takes over. And quite often you want to work on whatever it is that you're doing even longer. Exactly.
And that's actually why one of the other reasons I started doing my particular 10-minute journal, because as an art practice, that's one of, I collect lots of art supplies, but to actually sit down and use them was a bit of a challenge, because you feel like, I'm new at this, I don't know what I'm doing, what would I draw, how would I use it, all of these things, all these questions that your inner critic throws at you. But if you predetermine what you're going to do, which is what I had done with my thing, I'd said, okay, it's only watercolors, I'm only allowed to have 3 colors, I have to use a pen or this particular charcoal pencil, and I can't take any more than 10 minutes.
Oh, I like that idea.
And that solves so many problems because you can't muck about. You don't have too many decisions to make. You have to just get on with it. And inevitably, after I'd done that 10 minutes, I was inspired to go and do something else because you kind of jumped over that monkey mind bit. And that's right, way on the other side of the world, creating.
And that also makes me think of this really great quote by a man that's pretty famous in the States, Ira Glass. He's the host of This American Life. And I am going to chop up his quote terribly, but it was something to the effect of when you start out as an artist of any kind, it's because you have good taste and you want to create things that are good. But when you start out, they're not good. Right? Because you're new. And so because you have good taste, you look at what you're doing, you think, oh, I'm terrible. Why would I ever want to do this? It doesn't look good at all. But you have to push through that and that you have to just the only way to get to become the artist or creator that you want to is by showing up every day and just be willing to make whatever it is that you're making. And I, even with the podcast, that is exactly how I feel because I have that imposter syndrome often of who am I to put together this show, or as I'm learning the craft and listening back, oh my gosh, hearing your own voice is about the the most dreadful thing ever. And so to have to sit down and edit and hear my voice over and over and over again, and hear, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that. And so for me, my practice right now is to just still show up and say the only way to get better and the only way to become very good at what I'm doing is to be willing to be uncomfortable with that. And so I've gotten a little off topic, but that all of this from your soul work action step of just 10 minutes, sit down and create.
Oh, you were absolutely right. And, when you were talking about that, I was thinking the place I saw that in action the most is with my kids. Because when you look at kids, the way they go about doing something, they don't worry if they're bad or good at it. They don't know what that means. They haven't thought about it. You put paint in front of them and a piece of paper and they just go for it. They're not worried about that. And that's the only way we learn as kids. And this was one of the things that I just loved about having kids was it's like a do-over for your life. You get to start again and look at the world with fresh young eyes again, and just be a beginner and be open to seeing everything without all your doubts and fears and insecurities that come later.
So what's been the most exciting part of your artistic journey so far?
Oh, I think the exciting thing for me about art is no matter how much I learn, there's always more to learn because that seems to be the thing that drives me. I've noticed that that's part of why I've done so many things is what I like to do is I like to learn new stuff. So art is something that I feel will keep me going for a long time because there's always a new technique or something you can be better at or, some new art supply to try. So it's the love of learning.
I do want to ask one question about logistics. You have 9-year-old twins. I don't know if they're in school or if you homeschool, but where does your art fit in logistically as being a mom? I think a lot of mothers are probably wondering when just logistically do you find the time to fit in any creative time?
Well, I think it's one of the things I learned. It was a bit of a surprise to me how much time I actually spend being a mum, because in the beginning I was being a mum and I was fitting in part-time work, but for someone else. And when I stopped working, I realized why that was so stressful because I had underestimated how much time I was actually spending being a mum. So then when my children went to school and I wasn't working, I thought, I'm going to have so much time because I don't have a job and the children will be at school.
Right, as we all think. Right?
Wrong! Somehow. Yeah. Somehow there was just so much to do. So, and this is where, you were talking about that thing that I've said on my website about that I consciously choose to fill the spaces in my day. I think what I do is I try to look at it both ways. I look at my schedule and I look at how my children's activities and all the things I have to do kind of pre-populate my diary, my calendar for the day, the week, the term. And then I look at what spaces I've got available. So, for example, my little 10-minute drawing, I was thinking, I need to do that every day. And I thought, well, every evening, my husband and I tend to sit down with a cup of tea and we watch some sort of mindless TV and chat and what have you. But, well, that's a perfect time for me to do this. And that's what I did. So I kind of have tried to be a little bit more effective in using pockets of time that otherwise I was kind of frittering away. When I go to pick up the kids at school, I'm inevitably waiting for them in the car park. That's a great time for me to be talking to all my lovely friends on Instagram, because that's something I can kind of pick up and put down. So it was being a little bit thoughtful about the sort of things that I could pack into those tiny spaces in the day. And then I also go the other way, rather than being driven by my schedule, to which can feel less empowering, and you feel more like you're kind of working for somebody else, for other people, and you know, as much as you do it with love, you can end up feeling like you're always doing something
pulled
because you
around
have
by
to.
a rope all day, right? Yeah.
Yes, because someone needs you to, and this is also why I like my soul action step, because it's doing something just for fun. So that's something else that I try and do is say to myself, what do I need to do that will make me feel satisfied in the day, in the week, in the month? So it'll be things like I buy an awful lot of online art classes. The next step is to schedule time to actually do them. So I try and say, okay, this is important to me. Let me book that in for, Tuesday at 10 o'clock, and I'll make sure I do that, and then try and fit other things around it.
Very important for whether you are drawing, painting, or want to take an exercise class or anything that we can't just wait for the time to show up, to do it, because that time will never show up. We have to actually, I think, schedule it, decide when it's going to happen, and get creative with it too. So I like to hear that that's how you're doing it, that you're not just waiting for the time to show up. You're making the time scheduled.
And as you were saying earlier, don't underestimate those small pockets of time. So that's something I tend to do, is say, that's a big job. I need a clear day to tackle that particular task. No, not true. You set a timer for 20 minutes and you'll surprise yourself with what you can actually get done.
Yeah, gosh, I even do that with cleaning the house. Isn't that terrible? I'll set a timer for 10 minutes and I'll say, just clean it for 10 minutes.
No, I do the same thing. I have to do that. Because otherwise I'll spend all day saying, I'll do that next. I'll do that next. And then I won't do it. And then I'll get into bed and say to myself, look at all the things you never did. Right. Yes. And that's something else that I do that I find has really helped me, because I used to do that, get into bed at night, say, look at this long list of things I didn't do. I would overlook the things that I actually had done. So I started saying to myself in the morning, what do I need to do today? What one thing do I need to do today that will make me feel good when I get into bed tonight? And then everything else is kind of gravy. Inevitably, you'll do other things, but you've said in advance, this is the success marker. If I do that, then I've done well.
Perfect. Okay. So we have come to the last question that we ask every single guest. And that question is, what is one thing that you want all mothers to know?
I think I'd like them to know that whatever works for you is right. Because I think most of us as mums, we're trying so hard to get this mothering thing right. And we talk to each other about the different ways we're trying to solve whatever our particular issues or problems of the moment are. And we read the books and we go online and we look for answers. And it's all coming from such a good place that we love these little babies so much, and we want to do the absolute best that we can for them. But while we're all dealing with the same sort of issues and problems, there are so many solutions to every one of those issues. So whichever one of those solutions works for you is right. And, don't be falling into the trap of constantly doubting yourself when you hear that somebody else has got a different approach, or that you have different ideas about what constitutes a healthy lunchbox or whatever it is. If it works for you, it's right. Trust that your intuition will tell you if there's something you need to change. But if it's working, keep going.
Oh, beautiful. Love it. Kerrie, thank you so much for taking the time to share your beautiful story with us and just really your gift of art and now this gift of grace with the world.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. I'm so pleased to have been here with you today.
That was artist, author, and mother Kerrie Woodhouse. You can find links to her website, her Instagram feed, and her new book, Finding Grace, The Path to Acceptance, on the show notes at soulworkformoms.com. That's where you'll also find links to everything else mentioned on the show today and the free downloadable soul worksheet that has Kerrie's soul work action step, as well as journaling prompts pulled from the topics discussed on today's show. Again, you can find all of those things at soulworkformoms.com. As always, thank you for being a faithful listener, and thank you for being willing to engage in your personal and spiritual growth, your soul work, because mothering really is a spiritual practice. And when you heal your wounds and find connection with the wholeness that is within you, you heal the world. And that is evolution through mothering. I'm Michelle Duncan-Wilson. I'll see you next time.